So, Roger, I was just saying to you before that I've been down to Extinction Rebellion. I think it's wonderful to see so many people in one place at the same time. But at the same time, there's this whole danger that it will be co-opted, or it has already been co-opted. And that ultimately it's just used as a marketing prospectus for green finance to sell into pension funds, ETFs for millennials that are going to be, inheriting money from baby boomers. So would you like a bit of green in your portfolio?
Not the wrong kind of green, no. Which I think the Extinction Rebellion is. It is the wrong kind of green. Now, we were just saying, just before you wanted to put on the recorder, or I was saying, that Greta Thunberg and her climate strike has been hijacked in a way by Extinction Rebellion. And I think that's important because you mentioned Al Gore and that section of the oligarchy and the inconvenient truth, if you like. And of course, Greta Thunberg has been at Davos and embraced by and photographed with Emmanuel Macron, etc. And you mentioned the articles by the wrong kind of green that I sent to you, in which everyone felt a bit sicky, sort of seeing Greta Thunberg stood by Emmanuel Macron, etc. But there are other examples of her sitting by, say, Julia Goodall, I think she's the Apes in Africa woman, isn't she? The Gorillas in the Mist woman. And there was an article appeared about that, showing the photoshopping. There's a Salesforce online database management system for sales companies, and that's been photoshopped out of the widely circulated images of Goodall's a hero, the film Gorillas in the Mist and all the rest of it. But there is behind a certain take on the climate change story, if you like, particularly the man-made CO2-based anthropogenic global warming side of it. There's a very strong eugenics, particularly euthanasia subtext to all of that, right? Which is I think where Extinction Rebellion comes in. I see Extinction Rebellion as being particularly sinister in that regard. And you mentioned seeing Roger Hallam yourself earlier, and I find his personal projection. He gives off for me a real bad vibe. I get a really bad sense of karma when he's. I've watched a lot of his talks. I've heard what he's got to say. The other one is Jem Bendell, Professor Jem Bendell, and he's someone that Extinction Rebellion have done quite a lot of promotion for. And then there's also a large NGO, non-governmental organisation behind Jem Bendell, that were also at Davos and had they've got a YouTube channel in which they interview Greta Thunberg, and this is pre her TED talk, right? Now, so you have the climate strike, which I think Greta Thunberg's sort of kicked off, it seems, on her own. And then you've also then got a Swedish NGO that Greta distanced herself from. All of this stuff is in the wrong kind of green articles that you mentioned, which we should mention is a five part series, and there's a lot of reading to do there. Now, the better analysis for someone that's coming new to this is Frances Leader's analysis on her Steemit blog, and there are also a series of interviews which Frances appears in on the Mark Windows on the World YouTube channel, and Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, is an old collaborator with Mark Windows, and Piers is a long-standing critic of anthropogenic global warming and the agendas which are behind that narrative, which have nothing to do with environmentalism. Okay, so it's a complicated area because it also intersects with petrodollar hegemony. So it intersects with how money is brought into being, created, etc., and who is driving that process, which in the current world order is the United States, the Federal Reserve, and the International Bank of Settlements. They're the key players, and you have the things like the International Monetary Fund, etc. Now, why does Christine Lagarde? Why does she push the climate change agenda? Why is it? Well, my view is that it's because the current financial regime for money creation is in all sorts of trouble because of zero interest rate policies and just the huge amount of debt that's accumulated since the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, and I think it's always been the plan that if CO2, carbon dioxide, could be monetized and connected to debt, effectively that amounts to the ability to tax or ration the air that human beings breathe out, because we breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen, right? So Extinction Rebellion, where does it fit into all of this, and what does it support? Well, unusually for a radical, supposedly radical organization that's anti-capitalism, it's very, very quiet on things like war and the industrial military complex. And I find that curious. And like they were daubing all over the Shell International HQ the other day. Did you see that? Some of their people got arrested for climbing up the building and painting on them and stuff. Well, the key figures behind Extinction Rebellion were Roger Hallam. Okay, there is a business behind this, which is one of a consulting business that he has, and that dates back quite some time, and people have looked into this, and to understand what Extinction Rebellion really is, what you have to do is go back to the Occupy movement. And in the United Kingdom, you go back to the St. Paul's occupation and things like, you know, they occupied a derelict building and they had like a university there and everybody was talking about all sorts of interesting things.
I have to say that although I didn't spend very much time down there at the time, I was a bit busy, I had stuff going on in my life. About a year later, I started to spend more time with issues, and so I have some experience how some of that has.
Right. Well, but the point about the Occupy movement, it was infiltrated, and it was in the United States as well. And in the United States, it was also vilified. And an interesting character made a lot of documentaries about the Occupy movement in the States, and that's Steve Bannon. All right. Now, that's quite interesting because.
Did you say Steve Bannon?
Steve Bannon, yeah, who was working for Breitbart at the time. Now, but I don't think his segment or faction of the oligarchy were the only ones that were uncomfortable about Occupy, because Occupy, in which David Graeber was involved in, and I've seen him around the edges of Extinction Rebellion as well. I think he was interviewed, I saw, at one of the bridge occupations yesterday. which I noticed because I like I've said to you in the past, I've had my suspicions about his connections to the CIA for some time, and there are questions about the connections of Julian Assange to the CIA, and infiltration of radical groups like, say, animal rights campaigners and what have you, and anti-fracking groups, okay, is not a new thing. Agents provocateurs at demonstrations and what have you as well. And Extinction Rebellion seemed to have a pass from the establishment. You know, for an anti-establishment group, the establishment seems to embrace them quite, you know. But
well, Roger, you saw I sent you the FT Lex piece just now. It basically said, "Oh, it's very inconvenient for people living in London, but," and then it started to talk about investment cases around Extinction Rebellion. But just to say that, in terms of what you were saying just there about different people, what do you think? Sorry if I'm interrupting you, but if you could incorporate this in whatever you want to say.
Carry on, that's fine, yeah.
What do you think of? So you shared a Sky appearance from an Extinction Rebellion sort of, shall we say, representative. And
well, I think it was very representative of knitted yogurt, home counties, posh public school boys sort of carrying around their public...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch all of it. I just saw the end of it. But what I thought was interesting, of course, is that Adam Bolton is married to Angie Hunter, who was, you know, Tony Blair's, you know, sort of personal kind of assistant for many years. And then she went off to work public affairs for BP. So Bolton has his Sunday Times column and is very Murdoch, and his missus was, you know, very close to Blair and very BP. So, you know what you were saying about Shell and BP and things like that. Are you a big fan of those companies? And do you think that what they're doing is brilliant?
Well, I should tell you, I used to work for Shell myself. I was a graduate trainee at Shell back in 1985 and 1986 at the time of the Piper Alpha disaster. And I must say, Shell were a great employer. But no, I'm not a fan of any corporation.
Yeah, I mean, I should declare that the only reason why I speak to you with my slightly BBC accent is because my father earned dollars in the 1980s and 90s working for the Arabian American Oil Company, which I believe was not particularly connected to anything he stood for. In fact, the opposite. But, you know, he earned that money and spent it on me, so I can't complain too much. Or, I mean, you know, I have to watch which direction I point my finger.
Look, I mean, the Seven Sisters, which is, you know, Shell, BP, Esso...
Turn around, you can't live in here. Anything in the living room, so you're going to shut the door. Yeah.
You know, large global oil companies, not just multinationals, but global oil companies, are key players in geopolitical intrigues and have been actually since the beginning of the 20th century, not just the second half of the 21st century. So, of course, with the rise of the Rockefellers and the oil firm, of course, David Rockefeller and his involvement in the global movement, the rise of Chinese kind of, don't know what you'd call it, really. I mean, what they have in China certainly isn't communism. It's not free market capitalism. You know, I mean, what is it? I'm not sure. But I suspect it's what the people behind Extinction Rebellion have got in line for us all. And
sorry, what was that? Sorry, what was that? You said China's not capitalism, and then you said something about Extinction Rebellion.
I said I don't know what we would call it. What it is, I don't like very much. It's slave labor to the basically marching to the drum of global capital. I mean, it's. But I suspect that's what the commandants of Extinction Rebellion would have in mind for us all. The other thing, Extinction Rebellion is a cult, in my opinion. The way that they talk to their membership, and there's an interesting piece online from Mark Windows about a correspondence between a member of Extinction Rebellion who had said something critical of the organisation, and they have a structure which is typical of these sort of personality cults, where they discipline the members, and they basically try to break them down. Separate them from their own support networks, and then break them down mentally, and get them to rely on, and are constantly threatening to withdraw their embrace, as it were.
Yeah, I heard that it's called love bombing, and then afterwards everything is conditional.
Yeah, and they call themselves dragons within the Extinction Rebellion. They've even got sort of ranks and names for them, and it's deeply troubling.
Roger, I have to say, I did not know any of that. I did today, just by Marble Arch, see a little pep talk going on, and it was a circle, and it was a bit like what I perceive an American football team might do, or a kind of pre-hacker kind of thing. But again, like I said, I'm not in it, so I don't really know. I've been skeptical, and at the same time, it's interesting when I see lots of people there, and that type of thing. But yeah, it's a weird one. So
I would just say to anyone that is involved, or anyone thinking of getting involved, is listen to some of the interviews with Francis Leader. Francis Leader is a veteran activist, okay, who has been on many fracking occupations, and she recounts how actually the Extinction Rebellion, because it's been going for a few years, it's not a flash in the pan that's just appeared, and they have capitalised somewhat on Greta Thunberg's 15 minutes of fame, and then, but if you look at the people that are really pushing it, Jem Bendell, George Monbiot at The Guardian. I mean, The Guardian is a discredited newspaper now, and Owen Jones and Monbiot are not to be trusted, and the other one who isn't is the ex-Channel 4 guy that's been, what's he called now? He's not
Jon Snow?
Not Jon Snow, no.
Matt Fry?
No, the guy with the northern accent.
Oh, Paul Mason.
Mason, yeah. So effectively, Ranjan, I think what's happened in the last 6 months, and particularly in the last 3 months since Extinction Rebellion has come up, I think we've seen a lot of the gatekeepers break cover. And so people like David Graeber, people like Sharar Ali at the Green Party, to a certain extent Caroline Lucas, although it's always been pretty obvious which side she feels her bread is buttered, but also the people who support a people's vote, an overturn of the Brexit vote and things like that. And the reasons behind them wanting to do that they trot out, like, oh, the EU is responsible for the peace that we've had. The EU is, with its open borders, is the only truly internationalist way to approach these things. But it's 180 degrees against what the actual truth of the EU really is. And Brexit has been determinedly presented as having nothing to do with EU military unification, and the ramping up of tensions with the Russian Federation. Okay, and the EU obviously were very much involved in the Ukrainian thing, very much involved with the war crime, which was the bombing of Libya.
So would you say that the EU is basically pro-US, anti-African, anti-Asian, anti-Russian kind of corporate enterprise?
I would say it's a European imperialist enterprise, and I don't think it's too strong a thing to actually call it the Fourth Reich or the Fifth Reich. I mean, the Third Reich was Hitler, obviously. I always joke that Sweden's the Fourth Reich, so it would be the fifth by my. but I live in Sweden, by the way, so that's a little private joke.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's interesting for me that you live in Sweden, where obviously there's this Assange story, and Greta Thunberg as well, who. Just one other thing. I had a conversation with somebody today as I was walking past the roadblock at Marble Arch, and he told me. I said, "Oh, there's some criticism of Extinction Rebellion," and he said a lot of the people on the left have been very critical of Extinction Rebellion, and then I said, "Okay." And I said there was the conversation of how many arrests are necessary to make the front page. It's interesting that it isn't on the front page of any papers. But what he told me was this. I said that I had put this post up saying, is Extinction Rebellion a white NGO apartheid kind of industrial thing? And my friend said to me that because I heard that the NGOs are talking to Extinction Rebellion. And what my friend said to me was, yeah, so apparently what's happening is the NGOs, they don't like Extinction Rebellion, but they've copied them. And all of the listen to this, all of the child rebellions that have been going on after school on Fridays, apparently the people behind that, they are the green NGOs in this country that are behind all those child strikes. Because I never knew who was behind them. I think it's the green NGOs in this country who are behind the child strikes, and I never knew that. So, I'd be really interested to know what you think about that type of thing.
I think it's disingenuous in the extreme to say the NGOs aren't actually in with the Extinction Rebellion thing. But if you're going to have an organisation like Extinction Rebellion, the one thing you're going to know a lot about and have done a lot of work on is plausible deniability. But they haven't covered their tracks that well, and I personally think that's because Roger Hallam isn't terribly bright. I don't think he's very, certainly if that's
when you say they haven't covered their tracks, are you talking about the NGOs or Extinction Rebellion?
No, Extinction Rebellion. I mean, the NGOs haven't either, but the NGOs have been piling into and subverting things like positive money. All these green NGOs. But they're not green. They're the wrong kind of green. What they are is they're greenwash things. The other one is donor economics. That thing there.
Sorry. Which one? What economics?
The donor economics, which is the Cambridge economics professor who wrote a book called Donor Economics.
Donut. Yeah. What's the name? Kate Raworth. Yeah.
Kate Raworth. Yeah.
Well, that is. You can see whenever you see George Monbiot speak. You can see that he's using the same visuals in his language as she does, because he gets it from her and he says so.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's also people like David Attenborough with his, amazing suicide seals, or what they were.
Well, he's a depopulation guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's sticking to that. I mean, I love David Bellamy, and of course, David Bellamy has been drummed out of the brownies for actually saying, look, this anthropogenic climate change is complete nonsense, and it is nonsense. Anthropogenic environmental despolation is a thing, and obviously things like wars killing people. I mean, wars, bombs, Yemen at the moment. What have they had to say about Yemen, where there's genocide going on? Yemen.
Where? Oh, Yemen, yeah. Well, you were saying before, you were talking about oxygen and CO2, and you were talking, I think, about the CO2 markets. So whether that's a carbon tax. I mean, I personally was very interested in something which I've never managed to get anybody to talk about, which is the role of Richard Sandor, the guy who was the economist for the Chicago Futures Exchange. He's the guy who created the CO2 emissions market, in which you have your right to do CO2, and then you trade it, and then the polluter pays. And then afterwards, it's these false paper markets. Everyone says they're making a difference. Al Gore was big into pushing market solutions for CO2 and all this type of stuff. And
he would be when he made his first billion from it. But the point is, there's a guy called Clive Spash who wrote a paper called Brave New World of Carbon Trading back in 2000.
Sorry. What's this person's name again?
Clive Spash, Spash, and he's a professor of some sort of environmental stuff. He used to work for the Environmental Agency of Australia, and he got the sack for writing this paper about carbon trading. Where, of course, he pointed out it's all complete nonsense. You know, what they say they're trying to do and the net effect of what they're doing is it's a great front for making money or for manufacturing markets, but it's doing absolutely nothing about environmental issues. It misprices just about everything. So
hold on a second. You're saying
Spash believes in the CO2 thing, right?
But hold on. You say that the CO2 emissions reduction market misprices everything, but surely even before you have mispricing, just the very idea that you can allocate rights to pollute, isn't that erroneous already?
Yeah, but you get credits for things like planting trees and what have you. Not planting the right sort of trees, planting the correct sort of permaculture. But it's basically, if you were to design an environmental policy by a committee of accountants, would you expect to come up with environmentally sound policies? And I would say, well, actually, no, probably not. But a lot of the green lobby stuff that comes out, and from the IPCC, is written by accountants. It's not by it's not by climate scientists or climatologists, oceanographers, atmospheric physicists, and all of this sort of thing. And so it's the old thing about the if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, and with them, they have this financial idea and the debt, and for them, everything has to look like some sort of financial market, debt market, whatever. And they really don't understand anything else outside of their own praxeologically a priori theories.
But Roger, my question to you is this. Do you think that, because I know that you're quite interested in energy efficiency, and I want to know, why is that? I mean, do you think there is a problem somewhere? And if so, what type of problem is it in relation to energy? Why are you interested in energy? Why do you think renewable energy, or whatever it is, type of energy, is important? I'm not suggesting that there's only one game in town and you have to be a climate change monster, but is there such a thing as climate change? What's going on?
The only reason we've got, let's call it 8 billion people on the planet, it's less than that, but let's call it 8 billion. The only reason we can have such a large family, a human family as that, is because of usable energy, surplus energy. Okay, our way of life, our comfortable way of life in the West, is founded upon an abundance of surplus energy. Yeah. Now, that's why, if one is looking for a way to make the world a better place for the 8 billion people who are here already, and the 10 billion of us that are going to be here in 20 years' time, and the UN figures are quite clear, right? And if we want to make our home for our human family a great place for everybody to be, this is everybody now. I'm not just talking about white middle class people like me, or people in Sweden, or people in Europe, people in the Washington State. I'm talking about everybody in the world, right? It's all of our world, and there are going to be 10 billion of us in 20 years' time, right? And to make a good home and you know, to give everybody a good home on this good earth for all 10 billion of us, we have to recognise that energy is at the heart of that. Not money, not debt, none of that stuff. It's energy, harnessing surplus energy, and agriculture, and water, clean water. You know, the necessities of life, and harnessing the degree of technology that we've got to make that happen. And it remains a fact that fossil fuels are far and away the biggest portion of the provision of our energy needs. And they're not energy wants. It's not optional. We need that energy. We waste a lot of it, so you know we need to look at all of that. But even if we don't waste all that we waste and all the rest of it, you cannot overnight sort of say, well, to keep within 1.5 degrees, we've got to get emissions down to, you know, 280 parts per million. The fact is that below 280 parts per million of CO2, basically plant life starts dying. That's the minimum amount the minimum amount you need for a healthy ecosystem is 250 parts per million. We're at 440, whatever it is now, right? But, you know, they're saying, well, that's too high because we've had this warming. And there's a massive disjoint. There is no smoking gun as respects to where the CO2 is and where the temperatures are. There is no smoking gun. It's as simple as that. And it's an equally valid view to say, well, actually, the planet is greening at 450 parts per million. Maybe we're actually better off at this. Then you have to factor in the current sort of problem of the grand solar minimum, which is going to be with us for the next 7 years. But why am I interested in energy? It's because it's the basis of our lifestyles. You know, the way, you know, to be able to plug a vacuum cleaner in, to have a fridge, to have, you know.
Okay, so Roger, so just to be clear,
water, to, you know, to have heating, to heat your cold.
Sure. So Roger, so from what I understand, you believe in energy efficiency as a key way to have human dignity across the planet, and that fossil fuel usage is actually good, but has to be done efficiently, and that, and now this is a huge leap. This is an assumption for me now, but when it comes to say something like basic income and artificial intelligence and jobs and things like that, that they are also a part of the future that we shouldn't be ignoring, and that in actual fact, where do you stand on those things? Because I know that we've sort of mentioned it before, and I know that there are ideas out there that I might have heard that some of them that you approve of in some way or another, but I don't know. But I remember you telling me something about that.
Well, my own stance on all of those things is that, well, the first one is that artificial intelligence is a misnomer. You know, machine learning isn't, but it's not really machine learning. It's machine learning is just an iterative process. It's got nothing to do with learning, because learning can then start making choices. And part of the
okay. So artificial intelligence and machine learning, are they basically? It's kind of like statistical decision making, isn't it? As opposed to what you might call learning. Yeah? Is that what you mean? That it's in fact, it's basically looking at previous outcomes and decisions and doing some kind of a net aggregate of all of that.
Yeah, machine learning is not discerning. And discerning, contrariness, bloody-mindedness and pig-headedness is a really important part of the human condition. It's what makes us human. That's where love, you know, so it's I'm all for labour-saving devices, and I'm all for taking the the drudgery out of repetitive tasks and all the rest of it. But I don't believe that that these things should be used to primarily have a automated surveillance state, which is what they are being used for. So, for instance, I'm opposed to 5G, the 5G network, because it is damaging to human health. So that in terms of how money and markets and status groups work in human society, they exist in all sorts of societies or happy societies, and effectively, I don't think people are. People in self-organizing groups, I don't think would design mouse suits to live in. People do want to sort of have their own individuality. That's my own view. I think it's an important part.
Could you say that again? I didn't quite understand that.
In self-organizing groups in society, I think individuality and personality is really important, again, to us as humans. We like to distinguish ourselves or whatever, and some people like to lead, some people like to follow. Organizations and hierarchies and status issues within our own psychology and group psychologies is really, really complex, I think. The complexity that's in that, I don't think lends it to a one-size-fits-all solution ever. I mean, I think subsidiarity is really important, and that people should be able to associate and cleave to human gaugeable scales.
What is what you're saying, that the complexity of human experience is one which should not just be wiped away by some kind of overarching idea of extreme equality, therefore just we're all exactly the same, and so there's no respect for any of the different types of
and that's related to the artificial intelligence, so-called artificial intelligence field, in that people are talking about wetware, which is embeddable computer programming and trying to put all of that. Really, I think it's sick.
So is part of that thing where the assumptions within the algorithms tell everybody what is right and what is wrong and what is preferable and what is best, whereas in actual fact we used to have room to make those decisions ourselves?
Well, at an individual level, people should be free to make arbitrary judgment shots or to be bloody minded. Whereas what effectively the state is aiming for is a manual override switch, whereby it will override individual agency. And so, I mean, it's the old free will question. Free will has always really pissed off despots.
What I'd like to throw in here is that I don't have it to hand, but I found a book from the 1950s, I think, and it was an American psychiatrist. It came out on Gollancz, and he basically said that this whole mass society that's being pushed, that psychiatry was going down this road of never really listening to any of the people that came in for psychiatry, and basically only ever telling them, you have to remember to be the same as everyone else. You can't really be an individual. I'll listen to you and I'll take your money or whatever it is, have the state pay for this particular thing. But, you're not really allowed to be an individual. Roger, did you just give me your share screen?
Yeah, I was trying to see. I was trying to work out on Skype how to make the. I've got me in a small screen, my end. Am I big on your screen, your end?
Yeah. I think because I'm recording on Skype, what will happen is we'll both be taking up the same amount of space on the the thing. So you can go back to normal before.
Yeah.
Now I can't really see you very well.
Oh, I see. Okay. So what do I do to stop?
I can see Theodore Roosevelt though, and me.
Okay. Right, I'm now going to try and figure out how to.
But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you letting me know how you feel about this stuff because I value it, and it's just not getting much of an airing.
Well, on the Extinction Rebellion, there's quite a lot of criticism of it. I mean, okay, I've been looking for it, so I have found it.
But I haven't heard the straight up. It is consistent with a eugenics position. I haven't really heard that. Although, when I see empathy, something frugality, and when I see frugality, I think austerity.
Number one, they're brainwashing their followers, and they are followers, to repeat a mantra that we have 12 years left, and basically then everybody's going to die. So it's like Jamestown. I mean, I've done.
Is that the thing with the Kool-Aid?
Kool-Aid, yeah. So I say don't drink the yellow snow, like Frank Zappa.
Oh yeah, Nanook.
No, don't you eat the yellow snow.
It's my favourite. It's one of my favourite tunes.
It's a fantastic tune, but I mean that's what they're basically doing is they're force feeding yellow snow into their followers, and this is the thing that
at the risk of sounding extremely self-indulgent, but I will. The Nanook track, I believe, is track 1 on an album called apostrophe / Overnight Sensation, and the role of the apostrophe / inverted commas in modern society, because I do occasionally look at the front pages of UK newspapers, I think it's brilliant. They'll say something and they'll put it in inverted commas, but not speech marks. This kind of like open and closed apostrophes. And what they mean is that they don't mean what they're saying. I'm saying something, but literally that thing that I just referred to should not be taken literally. I mean it, but I don't want you to sue me. So for example, I think they had, with Assange the other day on the front page of the Daily Mail, they said Assange victim says this, and then victim was put inside inverted commas because there's no charges been brought, so they can't call her a victim.
No, of course not.
So what are you doing when you do that? When you subvert your own headline, it's preemptive subversion of the meaning of the thing that you're trying to communicate. It's sort of simultaneously brilliant and oh dear.
Well,
brilliant in obviously a kind of bad way.
I personally think that all mainstream media and most alternative media right now is all complete nonsense.
Yellow snow.
It's yellow snow. It's got nothing to do with what one would call reality. And it's got everything to do with that famous Karl Rove saying.
Oh yeah, you're in the reality community.
Yeah, we are the actors in history. We will tell you what the truth is. We will tell you what reality is, and you will faithfully reproduce it. But only we will know, and only we can say what is allowed to be.
Yeah, reality. We are the market makers in the truth game.
So, and that is what the current political class in the UK, but very much in the European Union, that's where they're coming from. And that's why they have such a problem with freedom of speech on the internet, because it's so obvious now how wrong their ideological mantras are.
So do you mean the EU and the transnational
corporations? Not just the EU, but the neoliberal dogma, which infuses all of this, the establishment. Okay, and it's like a corporation that owns several competing brands, and so people argue about, well, take Nestle for instance, and their different brands of bottled water, or which is mostly filtered water anyway, so it's all the same bloody stuff, and yet people will swear blind that one is better than the other. And it's a manufactured kind of illusion of choice, and we've had that in our supermarkets for a long time. There are very few supermarkets and very few large food groups that own all the different brands, and most of them are made in the same factories and all the rest of it, right? It's very true of electronic products as well. But we've now got it in our politics as well. And then they're trying to privatize politics, and that's where the NGOs come in. But of course, they also, if you look behind it and pull it back, you've got the Koch brothers and you've got Soros. And what people don't understand is that Sheldon Adelman, whatever, the guy in the States, the casino guy. Now these are. Sorry,
could you just tell me who's that person? Who's that person?
Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate who funds a lot of US politics and Israeli politics. You must have come across him. It's Adelson. I think it's Sheldon Adelson. He's like an old guy now, but well, they're all old guys now. I think the Koch brothers are young compared to Adelson and Soros, but even they're not spring chickens. I suppose our closest thing is the Berkeley brothers that own, is it Telegraph they own?
Yeah, sure. The Berkeley brothers.
So effectively,
do you know them? Are they okay? I mean, I don't.
I don't know them. No.
I instinctively dislike them, but maybe you know them.
Well, me, I don't know them. No. I've got no reason to dislike them. I don't know them. But they represent this idea that that billionaires are a naturally occurring thing and would always occur, and would occur without a government or without the financial system that we have at the moment. And it simply isn't true. There would be no billionaires without the rigging of commerce, as it is now internationally. Just, the reason there are so many more billionaires now is not that all of a sudden people have cottoned on to think, well, let's be a billionaire, it's a good thing to do. They're as manufactured as every fucking thing else. And so effectively what they are, I think, is they're being turned into the new sort of feudal manners, the feudal lords. It's just that their fiefdoms are going to be much larger and across boundaries and stuff. So
they have, what is it? Is it droit de seigneur without noblesse oblige?
Right. Well,
thank you very much. I've been rehearsing that one for a while. Thank you so much, Roger, and to all my global audience.
That's yes, donations on a postcard.
I can give you my my Bitcoin reception account.
Yeah, I was hold up your QR code or something. But getting back to this point about the illusion of choice and how Extinction Rebellion fits into that, I mean, they are no less manufactured than any of these other brands. And so whose pet thing are they? And you say, oh, there's a lot of people there, a lot of people going there. Did you see how many people went on the Pussy Hat March against Donald Trump? well, they were all bussed in by Soros's lot. I mean, Extinction Rebellion, what's its position on Brexit, for instance? I mean, I don't know. Have they opined? I really don't know. It's like a Chinese takeaway. You know, you listen to a Roger Hallam talk, and you know, you need another one half an hour later if you're in the cold, or you need to go and find someone sensible to listen to, because whatever
Roger, so in a sense, if you had to boil it down to one thing, George W. Bush, he declared a war on terror, which I understand is an abstract noun. And Roger Hallam, along, of course, with Al Gore and other people, have declared a war on another abstract noun called climate change.
Yes, and it's a completely ill-defined term, because it doesn't say, is it getting warmer, is it getting colder, what's causing it? You know, you see, that's all far too slippery and can't be pinned down. And if you look at all of the stuff about climate communication, that's what they say. Whatever you do, just don't go near the science. The reason they say it is it turns people off and they don't understand it. And there is truth in that, because it's a bloody complicated area, and it is quite a steep learning curve. But the main reason they steer clear of all of that stuff is that what they want to do is create this kind of cult-like religious kind of, well, it's a belief thing, and beliefs and emotions always must trump, you know, any kind of falsifiable fact. I mean, falsifiable facts are the enemy of cult leaders. I mean, of course. I mean, it goes without saying, doesn't it? So, yeah. I mean, it's. Tell me, you met Roger Hallam this morning. What did you interview?
Yeah, I saw him. I went to Marble Arch and I spoke to a woman who is one of the press team. So that's a new thing for me, is that they have this whole thing about the official line. So these are words that I heard, the official line. If I want the official line, I can go, I've got the contact details, I can get the official line. And so this is everything, it's all volunteer, but it's also official. And so you've got all of that going on. But anyway, I saw Roger. I said to him, because, you know, I'm a polite hypocrite, I do respect his achievements. I basically said to him, you were looking for 400 arrests in one day, and I read in Le Monde this morning that you got 300. So, you know, good stuff, well done. I'm really impressed at the fact that logistically they're all still there and all of this kind of stuff. And he basically said, yeah, okay, cool, you know, share it on social media, you know, get it out there. It's a big opportunity. And the question that I have is, a big opportunity for what? I don't know what the ask is. You know, I mean, the ask is general assemblies where you talk and you move your hands like this, as you can see.
That's how.
And sortition. So they want to do something which affects the decision-making structure of the country, and at the same time also where the policy is about zero emissions and things like that. So, you know, but I mean, even when I looked at the solar panels that were powering the stage at Marble Arch, I said, are you using that to power everything, including the cooking that's going on around here? Because there's a lot of tents. And they said, well, no, we have to use gas for the cooking. And I said, oh, interesting. And that's consistent with what you said. So anyway, I answered your question there. That was my conversation with Roger and other people.
The interesting thing about them saying they want to affect policy making and all the rest of it, because I mean, one of the funny little lines that sticks in my mind is politicians saying we want facts-based policy making, and what you actually have is policy-based fact making, or you know, and effectively
like
they're asking for a policy with no facts to back it up, but that's what they want. They want a system of government based upon their emotional feelings about you know, oh, we're all going to fry. Well, who says we're all going to fry? I mean, it's just, it's a ridiculous notion, and that what they don't do is they do not define the boundary conditions within which their supposed truth claims hold true. You know,
so just to say before you go any further, I really like that, because other people have told me that in some countries, you know, they'll commission a study and then eventually they'll have what's called evidence-based policymaking.
Yeah.
You know, apparently they do that in Germany and France.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And now they have policy-based evidence making. Yeah.
And then that's it. And I've heard of evidence-free policymaking, but I've never heard, and that's only recently that I've heard of it. Yeah. You know, a nuclear specialist told me that on Skype the other day. But I remember thinking there's got to be more to it than this evidence-free policymaking. And then you've really kind of gone to the next level where you've said it's policy-based evidence making. Yeah. That's something which I find completely believable. I can see the evidence of it all the time in all the newspapers that I read. You know, it's evidence-free evidence making. You know, policy-based. Yeah, so sorry, what were you about to say there?
Well, the word is nebulous. You know, nebulous sums up Extinction Rebellion. And I think that's actually really a generous term to describe it.
Well, they do talk about swarms. They say we're going to swarm there. So when they hit an area, they swarm it. We're going to swarm it.
Look. I mean, it's the harebrained idea of a half-assed academic that's studying some doctorate and fancies himself as some sort of, you know, of the people. Yeah, he is the Citizen Smith of 2019. You know, freedom for tooting, brother. You know, and he's as absurd as Citizen Smith. You know, he's Citizen Hallam, and I do find him absurd. I find his talks are overly long and devoid of content.
Roger, there's
as are Jem Bendel's, if I may say, and
yeah,
then also
who is that person again? Did you say Jim Blundell?
Jem Bendell. Professor Jem Bendell, I think he's at Goldsmiths or something, and there's another one, Professor or Dr. Rupert Reed, who's a bigwig in the Green Party, and they're all wrapped up in all of this sort of, you know, no evidence, all emotion bunch of shit.
Could you say those two people's names again?
Jem Bendell, Professor Jem Bendell, and Dr. Rupert Reed. Dr. Rupert Reed is always trying to hijack David Malone's Facebook page. But I mean, I've read their published papers, and I mean, frankly, well, they are half-assed. I mean, these are not exactly Nobel laureate material.
Okay, so I've got a really straight-up question for you now, Roger. And this is obviously something which I mention in passing, and no one ever really gives me any shit when I say this. But why is it so white?
Why is it so white?
Why is it so white? I mean, you know, listen, you've got free reign here. Why do you think it's so white?
And the Green Party. Well, it is a British.
No. I don't mean the Green Party. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I do not mean the Green Party. I mean, I've been to a couple of Green Party meetings, and I was really hopeful before I went. No, in fact, I went to one, and I just couldn't stand it. And the Extinction Rebellion is a Green Party vibe. Obviously, yeah. And so the thing is that, yeah, I couldn't stand the Green Party meeting I went to. You could see everyone was being manipulated by a couple of those people over there. And I felt extremely uncomfortable and I never went back. But the Extinction Rebellion is incredibly white. I'm not saying that you don't have individually pleasant people there, but it's incredibly white and it feels like a cult. And I'm interested in hearing your ideas as to why it's so incredibly white. Now, I listened to one recording where they had a guy from the US discussed why and how he was comfortable with the intensity of the whiteness of the environmental movement. And he basically said, because people of color, he said something like sort of, they're just not the demographic. They're kind of either too busy or they're not, they don't, I can't remember what it was, because the white people there at the moment, they're not all wealthy. A lot of the white people there are poor. You can tell they're not rich, you know, some of them. And, you know, they're camping there and stuff like that.
It's hard to, well, number one, what's rich or poor when it comes to the English middle class? And I think it's a very middle class thing. And put it this way, I mean, if you were working class.
But what do you mean when you say middle class? Because, you know, we have this whole debate. We have a whole debate about culture. Is it not a cultural thing?
Right, listen, here's a point, right? Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in Woolwich. Remember that murder? Right? His lovely family, lovely dad, all the rest of it. One of the biggest miscarriages of justice in this country, in Britain ever. Right? Obviously, middle class, bright, intelligent guy. Would someone with his background, having been brought up in London, that's been stopped and searched countless times by the, you know, by the British police force, that you know, and stop and search and all the rest of it. I mean, you know, Theresa May's all for that stuff. You know, Windrush generation, all the rest of it. You'd feel pretty uncomfortable, even if you believed in what the, you know, that would be on the line. You don't want to make yourself stand out with the sort of, you know, the problems that, you know, ethnic minority people, even middle class people like Stephen Lawrence, that I use my example. You don't go around baiting the fucking police. you don't. I mean, that would be complete madness. But these middle class people, you know, they're happily chatting with them. It's all, we're all in this together kind of thing. It's like the village fete. So, you know, I mean, they have to try really, really hard to get arrested. Listen, if you're black in London, you don't have to try hard to get arrested at all. It's, you know, so I mean that might have something to do with it. I mean, you'd be
good point. I mean, what I've been told is that 300 or 400 people have been arrested. Each one of them is essentially let out with no charge, and some of them are being driven as far away as Basingstoke or something like that. But overall, they get arrested, they get taken away for a bit, and then they can come back. So it's a really interesting reverse psychology.
Whatever they are, at best they're controlled opposition. Roger Hallam is not authentic or sincere, and there's ample evidence for anyone that wants to go and read it, that they are a pseudo organisation, and so controlled opposition at best. And the best that any of their supporters can be, or followers, they're not supporters, they're followers. The best category any of those could be put in is useful idiot. Now, I've heard some people say, well, it's actually quite good that they're finding something to protest about, and that's good. It's showing some sort of thing. But the really disturbing thing is that they think they've got permission. This is giving them permission to go and disrupt. Well, actually, radical movements and anarchist movements, we don't want anyone's fucking permission. You can take your permission and shove it right up your fucking ass, because, you know, I'm going to do my own thing over here with this group of people, and, you know, it's an organic kind of thing. There's nothing organic about them. It's a fully homogenized full milk.
Well, in a sense, yeah. I mean, in a sense, what's happening is a few people have made decisions, and a lot of other people are cooperating and falling in line, And they're basically saying someone is making those decisions for me. So Marble Arch, that decision has been made as a result of, you know, some careful thought, and they said, okay, that's one place, that's another. And so everyone is swarming around these other kind of central points. And so, as you said, it's not very independent in an individual sense.
It's manufactured. It's obviously manufactured. And of course, you know, how many arrests have there been for for violence yet against the public, or the public against it? You know, where's the agents provocateurs and whatnot that you get in other demonstrations which are not state sanctioned? Yeah, anybody that does a demo that the establishment aren't happy about is going to have plainclothes policemen acting as black bloc, or you'll have Soros's black bloc coming in and getting them into trouble. And this is what Francis Leader says about Extinction Rebellion. They have caused a lot of disruption in the anti-fracking community, the authentic one, by doing precisely that, by causing all sorts of problems. And most regular people can't afford to get arrested, because if you get arrested, get a criminal record, you lose your job. I mean, that's the other thing about if you're white, middle class and privileged, like I became in my life, you don't get one second chance. I mean, the whole of life is a second chance. You've got as many fucking chances as you want. So that's the truth. And so, you know, with Roger Hallam, I don't know what Roger Hallam's story is, but he's like an eternal student doing his PhD, bragging about, oh, I might finish it one day and all this sort of thing. You know, I'm sorry. I mean, I've got zero time for someone like that getting other people to do the dirty work for him. And he's like, so, well, I've been arrested, or I've been inside, or whatever. Well, there are lots of stories of controlled opposition. People who are infiltrating Sinn Féin, say, in the 70s, you know, they get locked up, do some porridge and all the rest of it, just to give them a proper cover story so they can go into deep cover. You know, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's fucking obvious. You know, even without, you know, I mean, I smelt a rat, and so I did a little bit of digging around, and then bingo. You know, it's not the exception these days. It's the default setting. Anything that purports to be for something or against something, you've got to check it out and see who's behind it. You've got to go at the about page, then you look deeper and deeper, and see where that leads you. But for people in the Green Party who thinks Caroline Lucas is wonderful, look at her members' interests declared on the They Work For Us site. Go and have a look.
I've never looked at that. What, you're talking about her investments and her loyalties, directorships? Her
funding for her anti-Brexit stance, where the money comes from. Lord Oakshott, Lush, the supposed green, you know, it's a consumer group, whatever. You use animal testing, and also the Rousing, the heirs to the Rousing Tetra Pak fortune. They've donated a huge sum of money in the last 2 years to Caroline Lucas and her anti-Brexit stuff.
Well, listen to this, Roger. When I was at Real Media, Lush funded the cameraman, basically, officially it was to buy gear, but in return, he had to produce films of protests. So that's what Lush. Yeah. So Ricky, the cameraman, who I fell out with rather famously for me, he basically was obsessed with only filming protests. And I would say, is it okay to talk about corporate power? You know, that's what I was interested in. You know, discussing the implications and the reach of corporate power. And you know, I'm very happy to take an environmental perspective on that. But that's basically what I'm interested in doing. You know, whether we have money or not. And I often never got any money, but the money was for that, and that was sort of like the lush angle. They wanted it like this, and they wanted it like that. We also got money, I think, from Vivienne Westwood and Joe Corey. So in a way, that is kind of, you know, people who do avoid tax and will be doing that on tax breaks. You know, and I mentioned it a couple of times to, you know, the collaborators. You know, sometimes when we said, oh, let's interview this person and talk about tax avoidance. And I would sometimes say, well, if we do talk about tax avoidance, should we not think about the fact that the money that we are using, or that is, so some of our infrastructure is coming from that type of behavior? You know, is that, and so, you know, it would always, you know, the topic would get changed quite quickly and things like that.
Everything's connected, and we're connected to everything. So none of us is absolved from any. There's none of us are holier than thou of anyone. I'm not a holier than thou than Roger Allen. As it happens, I mean, he gives me the creeps because I think he's actually manipulating a bunch of young people, and I just think that's unforgivable. He's a grown-up, they're young people, and I think he's abusing a position of responsibility. That's my view, and I frown on that. But I'm not saying I'm better than him or holier than thou and all the rest of it. I'm not even saying I care more about shit than he cares about stuff. You know, I don't know him and all the rest of it. I know I care about other people. I care about the world, and I care about all bloody 7 billion of us. You know, I love human beings. I don't want to see any human or animal suffering. I don't. I really do not. And so, you know, I kind of, and is there stuff that I've done or that I do that probably harms other people or the environment? Well, I'm sure there is. You know, is there stuff I could do better? Well, of course there is. You know, am I prepared to do better? Well, yes, I am. You know, I'm always open to learning. But what Extinction Rebellion is not doing, it's not teaching people to think critically. It's telling them what to think and telling them how they should protest, and it's training them in the best way to virtue signal within that in-group to get that in-group support. And I think that's wrong. I really think that's wrong. And I think Hallam is in large part responsible for that, and his funders. Like, he's got a business partner, there's a limited company behind it all, and you can find them on Companies House and all the rest.
Yeah, that was funny. I mean, I don't know too much about that. I mean, I remember he used to pick up the phone a bit more frequently, and then it became a bit more difficult. And he said to me, you know, that's basically what happens when you become, you know, inverted commas, successful. And also...
But they're not successful. This is the other thing that makes me laugh.
No, but I mean, when the money comes in.
Well, but this is what non-commercial people don't understand, and people, you know, I used to be a very rich, very wealthy guy. So, you know, what people that haven't been very wealthy.
Sorry, did you just say that you used to be a very wealthy guy? Is that what you said?
I did. Yeah, I was a multi-millionaire by the time I was 30, and I'm now 56 and completely broke. But you know, I mean, I made a lot of money in business. And, you know, and I don't miss it, really. You know, I mean, there are aspects of being very rich which, you know, are jolly nice and very convenient. But the simple fact is, and the point I wanted to make was that most people that haven't been very rich have no idea how poor they are. Everybody else, even people who think they're relatively well off, you know. So, I mean, I used to think my bank manager at Coutts was a pauper. I mean, he was on like a standard Coutts bank manager, 60 grand a year, and I had no idea how he managed to have a family and make ends meet with that much money. It was a complete mystery to me. I mean, I used to say, you know, why are you working for slave wages? I really like this guy, but you know, but this is the thing: the wealth is so percolated at the top that the amount of money it costs to have a Roger Hallam running round for you is absolutely next to nothing. Richard Tice at the moment's got Farage running round for him, and Farage is not friends with Aaron Banks anymore. But this is small beer, small change. It's pocket change for Banks and entice. And these politicians are puppets on a string for them. That's a fact. You know, I mean, Farage goes on about, well, I'm a businessman, I used to be a trainer. He hasn't done it for over 25 years. And you know, on a European Parliament thing and whatever trading he's managed to do when he's been doing that full-time thing, you know, I mean, I'm not.
Are you talking about Farage now?
I'm talking about Nigel Farage, yeah. You know, is Nigel Farage rich? I think not. Tony Blair is, mind. You know, Tony Blair is stinking rich, and it's all basically graft. Not hard work graft, but what the Americans call graft, which is basically bribery and corruption. So, you know, the Clintons, yeah, filthy rich, filthy rich. Is it because they're clever or they're good at business? Well, no, it's because they're fucking corrupt as hell. And the same goes for Al Gore, you know. But people like Hallam, and the amount of money it costs to get useful idiots like that to run around and do your bidding. Is it, you know, the biggest mystery of my life isn't that Donald Trump became president, it's that he even bloody wanted to be. Why would a billionaire want to be a politician in the president when you can buy and sell them? I mean, it's just, you know, that's the only thing that makes me question Donald Trump's sanity, is why the fuck would he want that job? It's nuts. That is insane. We've lost sound, Ranjan.